before we come to a close here, I want to come back to fluoride and do a 101 on that. Where is it coming into the body? When did we start including it in water, in different products? And why do we want to be cautious and basically eliminate it? Not basically, totally eliminate if we can, and do the best we can.
Fluoride, the water fluoridation movement started with an observation of a dentist in Colorado Springs, Colorado, who noticed that his patients really weren't suffering from decay from this certain area. And he realized that area was very high in a natural fluoride. I think it was spring water. It was really high in fluoride. And he kind of put it all together. These patients also had a lot of modeling of their teeth, which we now know is fluorosis. Okay. And my understanding is his intentions were genuine. He was just curious. He was like, oh, this is interesting. So this kind of spread, and essentially without any safety data or really any studies, it eventually was put in to the water of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And it just kind of took off from there, and it became this big public healthcare movement to reduce the decay rate. But again, there really weren't any safety or efficacy studies. And that is why the federal trial came about in the United States. So, shortly thereafter, they started adding it to toothpaste and rinses, and dentists started doing fluoride. And it's just, we get it everywhere. So to answer your question, where are we getting fluoride? I would say everywhere. I mean, it's too much. It's gone. The pendulum has swung way too far. So in many communities in the United States, we have it in our water. And now it's in your toothpaste, and your dentist wants you using it in a rinse, and your kid maybe needs to be on a prescription for it. It's also in processed and ultra processed foods. So if that manufacturing facility has fluoridated water, they're not filtering the fluoride out of the water. So if you're eating soup or, Capri Sun or drinks or, anything made with water is going to have fluoride in it. It is naturally occurring in very low levels in certain foods, including black tea, grapes, wine, things of that nature. What many don't realize, one of the top ways we get exposed to fluoride is pharmaceuticals. So it is used in many pharmaceuticals to improve bioavailability and stability. So that's important to know. And then some people are worried about just bathing and sitting in a bathtub with it. So there's no solid data on that, although the skin is a powerful absorbent organ. So I do wonder myself about that. We know fluoride isn't excreted 100% in the body. It's in kids, it's only excreted up to 80%. 80% isn't excreted, and in adults, 50% isn't excreted. And so where does it accumulate? It accumulates in calcifying tissues. And so that's your bone and your teeth and your pineal gland. And I think when someone says pineal gland, that's when people go, oh, it's woo-woo. But this is true. Okay, this is actually true. If you can just spend a minute, dig around the internet, you will see. It can accumulate there. It's also very electronegatively charged, so it's a very reactive element. It can compete with iodine, so that can affect thyroid health. But more recently, so let's just talk about the controversy with water fluoridation. So there's really no safety or efficacy studies, although we've touted it as the biggest public health initiative of our lifetime. And I like to be very honest and say I was a huge fluoride proponent. I went to traditional dental school, and I used to tell everyone they needed it. And if they even asked me a question, I am embarrassed to say I would give them a side eye, and kind of my ego would come out, and I say, I know better than you. You need fluoride, But meanwhile, to be even more hypocritical, I wasn't using it because I started reading about concerns with fluoride in college before I even went to dental school. So I personally was avoiding it because I thought, well, but my hygiene's so great, my diet's so great, I don't need it. But all my patients do, like the hypocrisy. So what changed my mind? Well, I'm in Portland, Oregon. We do not fluoridate our water here. And it was back like 2011, 2012. It was a ballot measure. And I was actually on the pro fluoride campaign. And I was picketing saying, we need this in our water. But meanwhile, I'm going to filter it from my house, It's crazy. So I had an awakening. And what I did is I went to a debate and I heard the other side. And it's the first time I'd actually listened to the other side. I didn't just say, oh, Tin Hat Brigade, oh, the pseudoscience crowd. I actually listened to them. I was so impressed with how professional, articulate, how much research they cited, but also I was exposed to its potential neurotoxicity effects and its microbial effects and the impact on bone health and the impact of, 40% of teens have dental fluorosis. And now that means they also have skeletal fluorosis. And what is it doing to our thyroid? And what is it doing to our mitochondria? And I honestly was a deer in headlights because you're not exposed to any of this in dental school. Like they do not mention one negative potential effect of fluoride. So it's the first I'd heard of this. So I had to go do my due diligence and I started reading more about it and pulling up PubMed and NIH and then connecting with other medical professionals, dental professionals who had concerns with it. And it didn't take long for me to quickly change my mind. Now, the thing is, I was very scared to publicly share this because I was very scared about the repercussion from my dental community, from the American Dental Association, et cetera. And it's taken a while for me to get the confidence to speak out against it. And now there's recently been a trifecta of information that's come out just since August 2024, which I saw coming and we all did, but it actually is official now and I'll share that. But I'm very confident now sharing this. I have no concerns, but I will tell you, and probably because of my social media presence, I have a lot of dentists and hygienists that reach out to me that also have concerns and have for years, but they're too scared to say anything. So I think it's really important to know that when you say, well, my dentist or hygienist love it, I would say, do they though? Or are they just saying what they think they have to say to protect their job and their license, which is just ridiculous. Okay. So there was the National Toxicology Report. So there was a federal trial. It's the TASCA trial. It was essentially the people versus the EPA. And it started about 7 years ago. And again, this is a federal trial. And so basically the people were coming forward saying, hey, Environmental Protection Agency, do you have any safety data on water fluoridation, the way that we're practicing it right now? Because we don't believe you do. And there were twists and turns and expert testimonials. And you can go to the Fluoride Action Network. I encourage everyone to do this. Spend an hour and just read through the timeline summary of the trial. And within it, you'll see embedded YouTube videos from experts, including EPA officials, ex-EPA officials. I mean, it reads like a soap opera. I mean, it really should be a movie, but you can't get very far into it and at least not raise an eyebrow, in my opinion, because this is the first time the judge said, I don't want to hear from the dentist. I know you guys love it. You love it for teeth. I want to hear from experts about what it's doing to the rest of the body. I don't care about teeth. And that's important because all those things we spoke about earlier in the show, those are the reasons you have dental disease. No one has dental disease because they're not using fluoride. That is wrong. That's a Band-Aid. Those are for people that aren't willing to maybe get their lifestyle under control, their diet under control, their hygiene under control. It's a Band-Aid, but I will tell you, it's no match for those imbalances. And this is why cavities are still the number one chronic disease globally, even with fluoride. I see plenty of cavities in kids and adults that use fluoride toothpaste, that drink fluoridated water. So this is just all smoke and mirrors as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so the judge said, I want to hear from epidemiologists, endocrinologists, neuroscientist. I want to learn more about what the concerns are. And also, I want to learn more from the EPA about their policies and regulations. And so the judge finally, it's been 7 years, he made his verdict. Now, part of that, what influenced his verdict was the National Toxicology Program's report. Now, this is under the Department of Health and Human Services. This report had been out for many, many years, but it was kept essentially under lock and key. And so the judge said, Judge Chen, he said, I need to see this report. So Freedom of Information Act got implemented and he got the report. And essentially it says, there is concerns with neurotoxicity in areas that are fluoridated at 1.5 milligrams per liter, but also optimally fluoridated areas. So optimally fluoridated in the US has now been determined to be 0.77 milligrams per liter. So the NTP report said for sure there's a lot of concern at 1.5 milligrams per liter, but also we're seeing concerns at 0.7 optimally fluoridated. That right there, the ADA, no one's talking about that segment of the report. Optimally fluoridated areas are still showing neurocognitive issues. They're only focusing on the 1.5, saying, well, okay, but that's like double. So we're fine, right? I will just point out it's only a 2x difference. So 1 liter of water essentially versus 2 liters of water, what your exposure is. And this is the controversy, is that you might drink a cup of water a day because you're chronically dehydrated. And I'm an ultra marathoner and I drink gallons of water a day. Plus I cook with it. I make soup with it. I boil my pasta with it. Plus I'm swallowing my toothpaste. Plus I'm drinking wine and black tea. And I take pharmaceuticals that have it. So how are we regulating it based on body weight per person when it can have neurotoxic effects and effects on thyroid and other systems? So that was the NTP report. It basically said, yeah, there are neurotoxic concerns. So the judge took that. And then his verdict said, based on all these 7 years of information, there is an unreasonable risk to current water fluoridation practices in the United States. And he put it now on the EPA and he said, you have to regulate this. You need to address this. And he said at optimally fluoridated levels, there are concerns also. So the American Dental Association is misconstruing the data. They're only cherry picking what they want to say, and they're doubling down still in support of water fluoridation. And they're calling it pseudoscience. Okay. And then you'll hear people say, well, the judge isn't a scientist. He's not, but he listened to 7 years of information and took that in. And he didn't dictate what needed to happen. He didn't say we have to ban it or we have to reduce it. He just said to the EPA, hey, you have to regulate this. And there's an unreasonable risk right now with current practices. So what are you going to do? Are you going to remove it, or are you going to drop the level even more? Which, by the way, if we drop the level even more, there's no safety or efficacy data on that either. Okay. We also have dozens and dozens of studies showing IQ issues in children, up to 5 points, especially in boys. That's on par with lead. Okay. So to me, as a dentist who focuses on whole body health, the teeth are important, but not nearly as important as a brain. I can fix a child's tooth, but I can't fix a brain. And I know if I can focus more on that patient with hygiene and diet and really profoundly life-changing issues, that they can live a life without cavities and disease. We're not addressing the elephant in the room, which I would, to oversimplify, is big food. It's our ultra-processed food and our lifestyle. Okay, now to add the cherry on top, the Cochrane report came out a few weeks ago. The Cochrane report is the gold standard of scientific assessment and analysis. This came out. Conveniently, the American Dental Association is not talking about it, but it came out and said, oh, okay, well, we reviewed all the water fluoridation data that's out there, and actually, water fluoridation doesn't work like we thought it did. It actually doesn't reduce decay rate like we thought it did. Now, we don't know why that is. Maybe our methods and methodologies previously in research were off. We've just changed the way we're looking at things. Is it because we are exposed to it topically more, and maybe that's counterbalancing the data? But the World Health Organization data shows that fluoridated countries have the same decay rate as unfluoridated countries. And what the Cochrane report has showed is that water fluoridation, it only reduces decay by 1/4 cavity per person. So that is not statistically significant. And especially when you're doing a risk benefit analysis, when you're choosing like neurotoxic effects, IQ drops, neurocognitive issues, thyroid issues, skeletal fluorosis, dental fluorosis, mitochondrial dysfunction, when you're comparing that to 1/4 less cavity per human on a population level, that's a hard argument to convince people of, in my opinion. So you're going to see this stat 20, it reduces cavities by 25%. You'll see that a lot. The NPR just did a hit piece about water fluoridation a couple of days ago, and it was so biased. I was really frustrated with it. But they said the 25% stat. That stat is incorrect. It's really misleading. That is not averaged out on a population level. Okay, so I think it's important to note we're one of the last countries, the United States, Canada too, but to fluoridate our water. I like to read the countries that have taken it out. Okay, so France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Sweden have all prohibited water fluoridation, and their decay rate is the same as the United States. So that's my thing about water fluoridation. NTP report, federal verdict that there's an unreasonable risk to current practices, and the Cochrane report. It's just, to me, it's wild. It's like, how much more information do we need to at least raise an eyebrow or have this nuanced conversation that maybe we got this wrong? And if people really love fluoride, I would suggest just use it topically. Just use it in a toothpaste form or a rinse, or the varnish at the office, but you don't need to be ingesting it. And the thing, it isn't addressing, and no one discusses, it's not being researched, is the antimicrobial effects. And I do worry, if we're drinking fluoridated water multiple times a day, year after year, decade after decade, what is that doing to our gut health and our gut microbiome and our oral microbiome? And where we're seeing just more, gut issues, serotonin, dopamine issues, more depression, more mood issues. I mean, you have to question some of these exposures, So regarding fluoridated toothpaste, people ask, well, is topical okay? I don't have an answer for you. I mean, we don't have any long-term safety studies on topical exposure. Now, in theory, you're spitting it out, but some of it is going to get absorbed through the oral mucosa. You'll be swallowing a little bit of it. What are the cumulative effects? I don't know. We don't have data on that. So that's going to be a personal choice if you choose to use it or not. I personally think and have found nanohydroxyapatite to be superior. My patients who switch from fluoride to nanohydroxyapatite, they get healthier. Their salivary health looks better. Their microbiome gets better, no surprise, because of the antimicrobial effects. They're arresting decay. Their teeth just look brighter, whiter. And we now have some data to show that too, just comparing to fluoride, that it outperforms fluoride. So it's just something to think about. But I'm pretty vocal now about being against water fluoridation. And we'll see what happens here in the US.
Well, to me, there's 3 high-level points here. 1 being that it's toxic. 2, it doesn't work. And 3, we have a safe option in nanohydroxyapatite that works better. So it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, again, I hate to be cynical, but when you look at the ADA, the American Dental Association, the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, when you dig in there a little bit, you see that 3M, Colgate-Palmolive, Henry Schein, they all donate money. Those are companies that produce a lot of fluoridated products. They're big fluoride promoters. So this can get we could go on and on about kind of the seedy underworld. People don't realize this is true. I remember when I first heard this, I said, no way. Hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is how we fluoridate our water. It is an industrial byproduct of the phosphate fertilizer industry. It's considered a hazardous waste. And so those companies have to spend a lot of money to dispose of it properly. But back in the late 40s, early 50s, with the whole water fluoridation thing, they said, oh, wait, here you go, city municipalities, here is this fluoride that you can use. And now we pay the companies for the fluoride that goes into our water. So again, people, I trust me, when I heard that, I said, no way, that's not true. But it is actually, that is where we get fluoride from.
All right, given what you just shared, how do you protect you and your family from this?
I'm really lucky because I live in Portland, and so we don't have fluoride in our water. So if I did, number one, I'd be writing letters to my city council at my water bureau saying, get this out of my water now. And they're starting to become more precedent. So we're seeing it being pulled from municipalities just over the past month or so since the verdict came out. There's a lot of lawsuits flying around. I think that's only going to increase. Just yesterday, I was part of a group advocating. There was a town right outside of Portland that wanted to add fluoride back into the water. And so we spoke out. It was a ballot measure. We spoke out saying, please don't do this, and all the reasons. And we won. They voted against it, which is really cool. So people are paying attention and they're concerned. The biggest thing too, it's a choice issue, right? So it's a medical choice. We're mass medicating a population without consent. And so as a consumer or a citizen, if you have concerns with fluoride and your water's fluoridated, you've lost all choice of how to protect your family. So now what do you have to do? You have to go buy some fancy water filter, like reverse osmosis, or, a clearly filtered counter unit. And that's not fair because that creates inequity in socioeconomically deprived populations. They can't afford fancy water filters. And then you could say, well, they can buy bottled water, but now that's also expensive. And we're dealing with microplastics now. So there's something interesting. There's a podcast from the JAMA network. JAMA Pediatrics is the Journal of the American Medical Association Pediatrics. And it was in 2019, I believe. It's only 12 minutes long. I suggest anyone interested, please read it. It's just discussing the Canadian study about IQ. And they really put it through the ringer. They are trying to rip apart that study and show that there are confounding variables that weren't factored in. And the editor said, I can't. This is actually a really solid study. And they he and another colleague riff on the podcast, but you have to listen to the very end, because at the very end, they both say, well, based on this study, and by the way, there have been many more studies since 2019 showing similar effects. Based on this study, I can no longer recommend my pregnant patients or young children drink fluoridated water. And they really should get water filters or drink bottled water. But I realize the issues with that too. So, man, they're just like, man, this is a problem. And then that editor has been on record for the Washington Post. He has a quote, it's not this verbatim, but he basically said, I would never allow my pregnant wife to drink fluoridated water based on the latest data. This is the editor-in-chief of JAMA Pediatrics. And he caught hell over it. He did. He had to write a letter from the editor in defense of why he published it and why he went on to speak about it publicly. And then it's just gotten brushed under the rug. So I encourage everyone to read that. But so a water filter, but I think the best thing is you have to try to get it out of your water, create an advocacy group, create a group in your neighborhood. I'm going to be honest. I don't think it will take much effort. I don't want to misspeak, but I'm seeing a big movement away from it. And honestly, city municipalities will save a lot of money by doing this too. So we'll see, but that's how I would start, is advocacy and just trying to have it removed from your water. And I think the Fluoride Action Network, if you reach out to them, they may have template letters, and they really want to support communities in this too. So I'd reach out to the Fluoride Action Network to see if there's someone that could help support you.
All right. So depending where you live, water's going to be a big source. In your case, not. Dental products, you've figured that out too. But any other areas for you and your family that you've had to switch things up or protect you guys?
Not really. I guess you could say processed, ultra processed foods, but we don't eat a lot of that stuff. Like my kids aren't drinking Gatorade and high C Capri Sun drinks and things like that too. So, but that would be another source, soups and things like that to be mindful of. Um, and again, I know I'm getting it. I mean, I drink tea and I eat grapes and, so I'm getting it to some degree. And I do trust in our body's capability of taking on toxins and managing them to a degree, right? So I don't stress too much, but my children have never been exposed to fluoride topically or systemically, unless, I'm sure we've traveled and they've had it somewhere there. But we've always used hydroxyapatite toothpaste, and their teeth are beautiful. They have no cavities, but it's because of their diet. We really focus on nutrient dense whole foods diet as best as we can. We cook a lot. We don't eat out a lot. They're kind of the weird kids that way, I suppose, but they've kind of embraced it now because we talk about it from a scientific level and the reasons why and concerns with the body and how health is paramount. It's our biggest, best gift is our health. And I think teaching your children that early is really important.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch a full episode. I'll see you over there.
Something that quite literally keeps me up at night. I'm very worried about it. I think it's a global epidemic. Not many are speaking about it. It's something called enamel hypoplasia, or it's basically undermineralized enamel.